A very warm welcome to the afternoon session of Viveka Jagruthi 2014. I would like to welcome Professor Ravi Shankar from BMS College of Engineering. We are honored to have you here, sir. Our afternoon session will be conducted by Ms. Jaya Dhindaw. She's going to be talking about waste management in a crisis management situation. Jaya Dhindaw is an urban planner with the Center for Infrastructure, Sustainable Transportation and Urban Planning at the Indian Institute of Science. She comes to the institute with over 10 years of international experience, 8 of which were in the government or public sector at the city of Charlotte, North Carolina, USA, and 2 in the private industry in Bangalore, India, as well as in Charlotte, USA. Most of Jaya's prior work has been centered on the human interface and interaction with the built environment, as well as the design of buildings and urban spaces to promote community interaction and environmentally sensitivity city design. She has also worked in the area of transit and transportation, focusing on transit-oriented development and the design of neighborhoods and communities. Jaya's proposed work at CISTUP focuses primarily on issues pertaining to the environmental planning, sustainable solid waste management, which is based on her master's thesis, as well as urban design and planning. She also has keen interest in strategic planning and governance as it relates to urban areas and centers. Jaya earned a bachelor's degree in architecture from Pune University, India, a master's degree in city planning from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, India, and a master's in community planning from the University of Cincinnati, USA. I welcome you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. How was lunch? Fine. What did you have lunch in? Was it paper plates, regular plates? What kind of cups were they? Paper plates? Not paper plates? Did you have coffee or tea this morning? What was that in? Where did you throw those cups? Was it in a separate trash can from the food, or was it the same one? Separate one? Very good. So I'm going to talk to you about the waste segregation crisis that happened in Bangalore. This started in 2012, and what I'm going to do is give you a little bit of a background on what led to the crisis and why we feel segregation is very important. So since you just had lunch, I think my goal is going to be not to put you to sleep, so I'm going to keep this short. And then we'll focus on getting some solutions from you guys to try and understand what it is that you think is important to not have such crisis in the future, or to have sustainable practices in the waste management sector. So let me just tell you, you all are all, I'm presuming a lot of you have been in Bangalore for a while or are from Bangalore, but still, it has a population of 9.5 million. The GDP is $83 billion. There are 198 wards. There are 2277056 households. The education is an 89% of literacy rate, which is actually one of the highest in India, with 20 lakh college degree holders. So, which goes to tell you that Bangalore is actually a very educated society. And has a per capita income of rupees 14,000, which is higher than most places in India. Now let's see how we're doing waste-wise. Now the amount of waste we generate is about 3,000 to 4,000 tons per day. Now the composition of the waste in Bangalore, and as it is in most Asian countries and India, is 72% organic, and the rest of it is paper, plastic, rubber, leather, glass, and all of the other material. Now the municipal cost of waste management is a staggering 450 crores per year, and even that is apparently not enough to solve our waste management problems. And the cost of the transportation, the major chunk of that money is transportation, which is 60% of the total cost, which is 270 crores. So what does that tell you about, waste management in general? I mean, the fact that we are spending a lot of cost on transportation to landfills or to wherever this waste needs to be treated, which tells us or gives us a idea. The first inkling that you get is that if we reduce that cost, a lot of our waste management costs in its entirety would be reduced greatly. Now, where does our waste go? 17% is recovered or recycled. You would be happy to know that Bangalore is actually one of the major recycling centers in India as far as plastics and paper and other things are concerned. And we have a major industry around waste recycling. 23% is converted to energy. So, you have a good chunk which is converted to energy in terms of biogas, in terms of biofuel, in terms of compost. And then 60% is dumped in landfill. So the point being that you're generating 70% of your waste is organic, which means it is degradable. But yet you're putting 60% of your waste in landfills. So that is just, it's a waste of space. It's a waste of what you're doing with a resource such as waste. So how have we been managing our waste in Bangalore, or in fact in any other city in India if we talk about it? Initially we had makeshift dumps on the city's outskirts. So what we had was a very small population, since a lot of the waste was organic. That used to be, the organic waste used to be fed to the cow, and the rest of it used to be dumped on the outskirts of the city. Then that worked up until the point where in 1994, Surat was hit by the plague. That led to the thinking and what should be done, because obviously the cities are becoming unhygienic and how do we make them clean. So there was a policy passed and there was a creation of the Municipal Solid Waste Rules of 2000, which are still in effect, and those are the ones that we go by. One of the requirements was that all the landfills where you're dumping the waste will be engineered, or they will be sanitary landfills. And then landfills have certain requirements. You just can't dig a hole and say, let's dump our waste here. There are certain engineering requirements that need to be met. Then what happened between 2000 and 2010 was that Bangalore's population increased by 40%, which was very significant for a city or a town of this size. So what the municipality did, their reaction was that they commissioned community dustbins or public dustbins, which I don't know if some of you all might have seen or lived in those areas where you had these concrete, basically little, enclaves where the whole street or the community or part of the community would go dump their waste, and that would be picked up by the waste collectors. But what happened was that these dumps were being infested by rodents, by animals and all kinds of things, and this caused another scare that this might lead to another public outbreak of a disease, and so the authorities moved from that dump to a door-to-door collection system. So people would come to your door and collect the waste on a daily basis. Now the result of this was that 70% of the garbage was being picked up, which was all right, which was good enough that the cities were remaining clean. But the prerequisite to have the engineered sanitary landfill was being neglected. So although you had these dumps, you were basically digging a hole and that's where you were throwing your waste. Now in 2012, the Karnataka State Pollution Control Board issued closures of some landfills because they were not sanitary. And in August 2012, the city's waste management employees went on a strike. So those of you who were around 2 years ago know what happened. And the waste management workers went on a strike, and there was basically waste all over the city, on the roads and everywhere. And villages around Mandur, which was the last operational landfill, and that's where the waste was being dumped, they were basically protesting the waste dumping. So the trucks would go and stand there, and there was a standoff between the villagers and the waste, the BBMP. And the villagers were claiming that this was leading to hygiene and health problems in their areas, and so they would not like any more waste to be dumped in Mandur. And in late August 2012, this is about a month after the waste management employees had gone on strike, they returned to work, but by then the damage was done. So what you had was waste all over the city, on streets, on empty plots. Some of it was being burned as a way to, treat that, but it was all over. Now the garbage pile-up that was everywhere led to a scare of dengue and chikungunya and other diseases. And the BBMP was asked to address the situation by the High Court. So what the BBMP did in response was they went and they looked at the solid waste management rules of 2000 that had been drafted. And they said, okay, we were supposed to segregate, but that was something that the city has completely missed since the institution of these policies and laws. So we'll go back and say that you need to segregate the waste. Now what BBMP did was they classified the waste streams, they outlined methods of disposal, and they also had this structure for penalties in case you weren't doing what you were supposed to do. But what they did was they classified the waste streams into 6 categories. So from wet waste, dry waste, household hazardous waste, etc. The waste was categorized into 6 different categories, which was frankly quite overwhelming for a majority of the citizens to understand what those categories were and to be not confused about, does glass go with the plastic, does it stay with the household waste, or where it goes. And these, to make matters worse, there were 6 categories, and then these were to be collected on specified days. So your wet waste will be collected, say, every day, but your dry waste will be collected on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the hazardous on Saturday. And so they just made the matters, very complicated. So basically what we tried to do was, this was about a month after after this mandate came into being, and we decided to see how are we doing as a city in terms of segregating. Have the people understood segregation? Have they understood what this law means? Have they understood what downstream implications it has, or what it is that they are segregating for and why they're segregating suddenly? So we picked Malleshwaram, A, because it is very close to the Indian Institute of Science, and B, because it's one of the wards where elections was fought on the basis of waste, as some of you might know that. And it's a very, it's an educated area of the city. It represents a good cross-section of what Bangalore looks like, and that's why we chose Malleshwaram. So basically our strategy was that we will divide the land use categories into residential, single family or houses, multifamily, which are 3 to 4 stories, high-rise, which are 5 stories and above, commercial, industrial, office and institutional. Really, we weren't very concerned with the industrial, office and institutional, because they have their own strategies mostly for waste management, and even if you look at hospitals and institutions like that, they have their own strategies in place. It was mostly the residential and to some extent the commercial that we were really interested in. And we also divided our surveys based on income categories. So how are the lower income people doing? How are the mid income people doing? And how are the higher income people doing? Is there a correlation that if you're a high income person that you will be segregating waste, and so on and so forth. And then this was through surveys, and we also did some spot checks. So we actually went to people's homes and we had them answer the survey, and we said, can we take a look at your waste? And we would see that if what they're saying is what they're doing. In many cases that wasn't the case. People thought they were segregating, but then there were plastic candy wrappers in the wet waste, or they didn't know what to do with the pot that had broken in the home. So it was part of the paper and plastic, and so there was still some confusion. So this is what we found. The average garbage generated per occupant per day was 2.5 kgs, which is actually pretty high. Typically, we say 1 kg per day per person is what is expected. So this was 2.5 kgs in the commercial. In the residential, single family, multifamily, high rise, it was all within check. We also said that the frequency of waste segregation by income category. So was it that lower income categories segregate more or they don't? And there wasn't really a correlation. In fact, many high-income people or communities which had higher income, they never segregated, or they weren't required to segregate. If you looked at it from a land use perspective, the commercial, as we suspected, was the worst in terms of segregation. They almost didn't segregate. So like you said, your plastic cups that you drank coffee and went into the same garbage as the food and other materials. In terms of the residential, the single family were having a hard time segregating. And their bone of contention was, well, we segregate, but then when the lady comes to pick up from door to door, she mixes it all up, so what's the point? Some of the high-rise were segregating really well, and that was because the community mandate was passed that this was the only way that garbage would be accepted. So unless you segregated into plastic, paper, and kitchen waste and other wastes, they would not even accept your waste. They'd say, take it back, segregate it for us, and we'll take it. So the high-rise communities that were there, for example, Mantri and Brigade, they were doing a good job of segregating. Now we also asked the citizens whether waste was being collected on a daily basis, and they said no, it wasn't. It was infrequent. There was no frequency that they could predict that waste will be collected on these days. It's supposed to be, but it wasn't. And so we asked them, so what did they do with the waste that was not being collected? 33% said it was being stored on site, which meant they kept it in their homes. Some said they were throwing it on the street and leaving it there. Some said they would leave it on the gate, and the other that you see here, which is 4%, is people who said that we would ask the house cleaning lady or whoever to go and dump the garbage in this neighboring plot which is empty. So that's what they were doing. And the waste collection without segregation, although the mandate had been passed and there were penalties issued around that, 87% of the waste was still not segregated, and it was still being collected because people wanted to get rid of their waste. In terms of the perception around whose responsibility it is, we saw that 74% of the people believed it was a collective responsibility, that it wasn't just for the government or the individuals, it was both of their responsibilities. 11% thought it was the government responsibility solely, that my waste should be completely handled by the government, and 15% thought it is solely individual responsibility. If I have generated it, I should take care of it. Now, we also asked people whether they thought that do they feel segregation is advantageous or not? 92% said that it is advantageous, 8% said that no, it is disadvantageous, or they said it is inconvenient. And so it's not like people didn't know that waste segregation is good, it is just that they weren't doing it. Now, in terms of the survey responses that we got back on what was being done, 59% of the people claimed that they were segregating, but weren't. 13% said they were segregating and they were doing it correctly, and 28% were not segregating. So what we found was it was actually only 13% of the people who were segregating their waste correctly as per the BBMP mandate. A lot of this had to do with inadequate infrastructure. So even the waste collectors who were coming to collect your waste, they didn't have the equipment to take it in the 4 segregated or 6 segregated categories, and this is what was happening. So what was the lessons that we learned? We basically saw that there's a huge lacuna in people's awareness and understanding of waste streams. What those 6 streams of waste mean, people had no idea. These are things that even educated people, had questions about, including me. If it's a Tetra Pak, where does it go? Is it plastic? Is it paper? Where is that supposed to go? Waste collectors lack training in proper segregation practices and its needs. What we found is, unless you explain to people why the segregation is important, what is the need, what are the downstream impacts of not segregating waste, what happens at the landfill, unless you show them, unless you give them that picture and show them what happens and explain to them why it's necessary, people are not very inclined to, segregate waste or actually, inculcate any, socio or civic practice otherwise. The waste collectors were not provided with proper equipment, obviously. The 6 categories were extremely overwhelming. And the irregularity in the waste collection was also responsible for the illegal dumping of waste. And implementing and sustaining waste segregation practices involved changing long acquired habits. There was a time when I think, some of you might remember, our grandmas would actually recycle a lot. They recycled a lot. The people who lived in rural areas, they would feed the organic waste to the cow, or it was used as manure or something. So there was a use for everything. And in fact, if you try to understand, there's no word in the Indian languages for waste. I mean, think about it. There is no word for waste because nothing was ever wasted. It was just culturally we moved away from that practice when the government started saying, oh yes, we'll take care of your waste. And that's when our behaviors just changed. So we came up with certain recommendations, and these were at the policy level, about what can be done to have sustainable solid waste management in cities. And we were looking at Bangalore. And we said that we have to involve all the stakeholders, which meant the government has certain responsibilities, the citizens have certain responsibilities, and the people who collect waste have certain responsibilities. So the first thing we said was you need to simplify the waste streams. So instead of having these 6 categories, you bring it down to 2. It's wet waste or it's dry waste. The next thing we said was that once the dry waste is collected, it should be the BBMP's responsibility to further segregate it down into plastic, paper, and all the other components. Then we said we need to educate the staff or the waste collectors on the method of collection, on the acceptable waste quality. So what kind of waste is acceptable? There's certain quality which is not acceptable, which you need to tell the people, go back, segregate this further, and then we'll take it. And the areas of responsibility. So for example, the waste collectors that we found in Malleshwaram, it was random. So one day this waste collector would do 2 streets. She would do 17th and 18th cross. The next day she would do 9th and 7th cross. I mean, there wasn't anything, there was no set pattern. So you didn't have a relationship with the waste collector. And also she was not responsible or answerable to anybody or accountable to anybody for what kind and whether she collected waste from every household. We also said that you need to ensure efficient and timely collection, which meant that the schedule should be made simple. So you have, wet waste every day and then dry waste on Sunday or Saturday or whatever, and just keep it very simple. And then the post-collection treatment, like I said, that there was to be a team set up which would further segregate the waste. We also said that the improvement, there needs to be an improvement in the collection equipment. If you're not equipping the workers to collect the waste in the categories you're asking them to, but the mandate has been passed, there's obviously that gap, and so you need to equip them. There needs to be education and awareness campaign for the public. There were several education and awareness campaigns that were undertaken, but they were not adequate or they were not targeted well. There also needed to be a dedicated helpline or a website with FAQ section and an interactive form. So you could ask, hey, I have a Tetra Pak or I have this, where does this go? We also said that you need to form a monitoring team that ensures that the quality and the functioning of this program was happening, so that you have a team which is basically like auditors which go around checking different areas to see that the waste is being collected properly in a timely manner and in the way that it should be in the segregated fashion. The other thing we said was incentivize segregation. So for example, in Hyderabad, what they did was they had these ward competitions for the cleanest ward. So what they would do is, have these people who would go around and just in a cycle with a little bell, and they would go around and they would say that, if there's anything in your house which you feel you have not been able to identify which category it needs to go into, we'll take it. And at the end of a month, they would see, or a quarter, they would see which was the ward that did best in terms of segregation, which was the ward that, did the best. And so there would be an incentive given in terms of, it would either be some kind of a monetary incentive that the ward would get, or some other incentive, which worked really well actually. And then also, we said that we need to use technology for waste management. I mean, Bangalore is the IT hub of India, and so, it would be very sensible to use technology so that, your segregation is happening. You can see exactly the places where it's not, where the waste is being dumped. I mean, you could use GIS and other, mapping systems to see how well you're doing in terms of waste management. So in terms of the waste collector's responsibility, what we said was they also need to understand the need for segregation. They need to know the collection schedule. They need to know what the 2 categories are, where these wastes will go and how they will collect them. They will also maintain the segregated piles and not mix them up. and they will introduce themselves to the people in the area that they're responsible for. So, you go to the house and say, I'm so and so, I'm your waste collector, and do you have any problems? Do you need any help? Do you have any questions? And be there. So have a relationship with the people who live in the area that you're responsible for. And the citizen responsibility, lastly, was basically identifying the waste collector in your area. So if they haven't introduced themselves to you, you introduce yourselves to them. A lot of the people said, oh, we work, and so both of us, husband and wife, we leave in the morning, and we don't know where to leave the waste, because if we leave it out, the dogs or the rodents may get to it, and we don't want to keep it in for 2 days at a stretch because it gets smelly, so what do you do? And so these are areas where waste collectors can actually help you with scheduling. You also, as a citizen, need to know the schedule for waste collection in your particular area. Segregate your waste, and discouraging littering in the streets and public spaces. So whenever you see it, discourage it, go up to the person, or it's as simple as if someone has eaten something, thrown a wrapper in front of you, go pick it up and throw it in the trash. That itself, that goes a long way in, teaching civic behavior. So in conclusion, I guess the bottom line of the study was that the culture of waste segregation needs to be revived. There was a time and there was an instance where we were very good at this, where we recycled, where we reused, and that needs to be revived. Product packaging needs to be simplified. Now this is to the commercial and the industry particularly, where you see shirts or clothes, they are packaged in so many pins and plastics and papers, and that's not needed, that's not required. If you go to European countries, most of all, you're required to take your own bag because there is no plastic bags that they'll give you. You can buy cloth bags at the shop, but mostly people carry their own little cloth bag. They go to the shop. If you buy a shirt or if you buy any kind of product, it's just given to you as is. There is no product packaging. There is no plastic, paper, pins involved. It's just it's very simple. So, and that needs to be done. And then civic behavior needs to be reinforced. So we need to keep reinforcing through our personal habits and through our personal behavior, just civic sense and civic behavior about waste. You should not litter it. There is a space and a place for everything, and the street or public spaces are not the place for it. Now, this is the last piece that I'm going to show you. What we had also done is we'd gone a step further and said what would be ideal is to not have centralized waste dumping areas or centralized landfills. What would be ideal is if you have decentralized systems, so each ward or each neighborhood has a site where the waste is collected and it is, the initial treatment of the waste is done there. And then it goes, whatever is found to be, not usable, not reusable, not recyclable, goes to the landfill then. So what we said was ideally you would want to make this, visible, you would not want to hide it. So it's not something that needs to be just hidden away in a corner and where no one's paying attention, but you want it to be visible so that people have a good relationship with waste, so to speak, so that they don't see it as, chi-chi, refuse, and, not touching it, not going there, but so that there's a healthy relationship to where you are like, yes, this is how this needs to be done. So we said we would like to set up a waste, a decentralized waste facility, which would ideally fit into a 40-60 site maybe, which is a typical plot size in the city. And you don't want it to be this big, sprawling, facility. You just want it to be a small, contained facility, enough for the neighborhood. And we also said that since it needs to be in the public eye a little bit, we said maybe we take the municipal parks and we make this a part of those parks. So you take a part of the park, and we took the one in front of Mantri Mall, if some of you are aware with it, the park that's right opposite Mantri Mall. And we said you take a part of that park and you turn it into this, waste management facility, a decentralized facility. So what happens is all the waste comes through in a little cart and or in a little auto rickshaw or whatever the means of collection is. It comes there, and the wet waste is composted. The dry waste is further segregated into paper, plastic, glass, and so on and so forth. Since Bangalore has such an active and vital recycling industry, you invite the recyclers to these decentralized places, and they come and they buy the raw material from these decentralized areas, and whatever is left over, for example, rocks, debris, construction, debris or whatever, that goes to the landfill. So that itself minimizes the amount of waste that's going to the landfill. And we came up with 2 design options. So we came up with one which was a 2-story building. with a small footprint, 40 by 60 site it would fit into. It was low cost, compact design. It had a green roof and sky, natural light for natural areas for light and ventilation. And it used solar panels to generate whatever little power that they would need to do their work, basically lighting and for those kind of needs. And so this was the design that we came up with of a typical waste management facility. So as you can see, it doesn't have to be ugly. It doesn't have to be a dirty place. It can be very aesthetic, it can be very functional. This was the second option, that if you have a little more area, if you are not restricted to a 40 by 60 site, if you're on the outskirts of the town, and you can spread out a little bit, you can have this kind of a facility. And again, this does not need to be ugly. It does not need to be, unfriendly to the neighborhood in which it is located. In fact, we said that you can actually have a little, if you have a little rock wall or something between that separates, like a boundary wall that separates this facility from the park or from the neighborhood. So that wall could be used as like this museum or this little science artifact thing which could be used to educate people about waste and about, where it goes, what should be done. And again, it does not need to be, something ugly. It can be pretty aesthetic, it can be functional. And it can be right in your community, where if you have any questions, where if you have any issues, you can go to such a facility and have them answered. And you can, instead of out of sight, out of mind kind of an attitude, this can actually be a part of the community. So I just wanted to show this to you because this was part 2 of the study that we had done. That because one of our recommendations was to decentralize waste, and this was just a demo of how you can do it. And this was actually shared by by us with BBMP, and they were very interested in having these facilities. Unfortunately, the waste crisis is back because of the landfill issues. And what we are trying to do is expedite this so that the decentralized model along with a centralized model, because you do need, for even the landfill products, you do need certain kinds of treatments. And so a mixed model where you have the decentralized plan along with the centralized facility can work together and hopefully can lead to a sustainable way of managing your wastes. So that was that. Thank you. And do you have any questions? Because what I'd like to do is open the floor to you to get your ideas on segregation is one thing that can be done. And I'd also like to hear from you whether you really believe that segregation is the way for us. And if you have any other ideas on how, we can manage our wastes better. So if you have any questions, I'll take that and then we can open the floor. Yes.
There are incentives, there are many programs for waste management. Agree, but the thing is, the attitude of the people, the innocence that people show towards the attitude of the people, the indifference that they show, that's not something that's easily eradicated. Like, even if we all go and conduct programs like this, talk to people about it, we can just make sure that we are doing our duty by letting people know what's happening, but then ultimately it's very difficult to change people's mindset. So that's where the problem lies actually. Like, even when you were mentioning, you were talking about how families would come up with reasons like they're working and all of that. So what exactly can be done towards that? Because if not for that, the next step has no use at all.
And actually this is what I want to hear from you. So what can be done to change civic behavior and this acquired behavior? Because this is not our natural behavior. It was never this. Like I said, we always reused, we always recycled. If you look at some of our, the ladies who work in our house, or if you look at our grandmas or the previous generation, they will still reuse and recycle a lot. Why have we stopped doing it, and why do we not care anymore? I mean, what can be done about that? In fact, because you're a young crowd, and that's what I'd love to hear from you about what can be done to change these acquired habits.
Because like 2 years back, three of us, actually all 3 of us are present here. We tried with this going to a school and talking to those students, and there were activities through which we tried to build in a thought, provoke a thought in them as to asking them to do something about it. But then at the end of it, we didn't get that feeling like, okay, we have done something at the end of this. Like, they're going to carry over with it. Somehow,
you did or you didn't?
We did not.
Okay.
Somehow we did not feel like the thought has entered them, and they are going to do something about it. So I don't know, even getting like activities is something that school students would like doing it. So we came up with that way of dealing with the students, but that just didn't click. So what exactly is it that makes people think about it and do it?
So what exactly is it that incentivizes or disincentivizes people to deal with their waste? And I'll tell you, I'll cite an example. You did it with a school, and there's a German institution here called Goethe, and they actually, basically what they do is all the PAR schools, all the schools which offer German as a second language, they have this conference for these schools, they have this common platform for these schools to interact on, and most of it has to do with sustainability and environment. So, so we interact a lot with these schools and with these groups of students, and we've heard many schools who try to address the waste problem by doing activities, by having recycling in school, by going around a pilot community, and these are schools from all over India. So in Delhi, in Najafgarh area or over here somewhere, they've done a pilot with like small communities there and shown them how do you deal with waste. They've done things like street plays to educate people and make them aware about how do you deal with waste and how do you do this. Well, you'd be surprised because little minds, and this is my belief, that young people, it's the best way to influence society is to appeal to them. If you have an idea which appeals to them, if you have a thought which they are ready to grasp, then that's your best bet. That is the only way to go now. And you'd be surprised because you think you've not made a difference, but there's probably a 7 or 8-year-old child who's going home and asking their parents the question at least, that why do we not segregate or why do we not do this? And when children ask parents that question, that itself can become an incentive many times. And the parents start questioning, why do we not do this or that, or can things be better, should things be better? So you'd be surprised at how much impact you have. You feel like you've not had any impact, but you probably have. And I think talking to school children, educating them at that level, to college children, and just you guys, I mean, that's the best thing that can be done. BBMP, we can talk about bad governance, about bad implementation of policies and rules, which there's everything but still nothing is being done. That's always there, and we can talk about that. But that is something that will require a total institutional shift in mindset, which is not something that will probably happen in maybe even our lifetimes. But what we can do is educate and make the younger generation aware so that the practices that they grew up with or the values that they grew up with is different.
And I just have one more question. The thing is, I'm from Christ University, and we have separate dry waste and wet waste dustbins everywhere. Like wherever there are 2 bins. But the thing is, every day morning when we see the ladies picking up the thing, they mix it all together. So how does it actually work when we are separating it and ultimately it all gets into the same place?
Yes, I think the question that needs to be asked there is, you should just ask those ladies why they're mixing it up. And they will probably say one of 2 reasons, that A, we don't have the equipment to keep this segregated, or B, we have not been told to keep this segregated. It's usually one of those reasons.
The thing is, the recycling unit is inside the campus.
Okay.
And they take it there and they separate it again. So the thing is, they are not trained, and that's the worst part, where the people who should actually be given the right knowledge about what's happening, they are not given that. So it's like just doing it all over again.
It's inefficient and basically duplicating effort.
Yes.
So I mean, you could talk to your management about it, it depends on how your management is, if they're receptive to, listening to you and to ideas that you have, and especially these are things that need to be pointed out many times. You'd be surprised how many times management is totally not aware that this is happening. They're not aware of how things are being implemented. They know that they have a rule, they know they've put these people in place in charge of this, and they have a recycling unit, and that's all they're concerned with. Sometimes they don't know how the steps in the middle are happening. So maybe this is something that you can bring it up, with the management and say that, this is happening and we've noticed this inefficiency. And if you have a good management, it would be appreciated if you bring it up, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
jotted down some points here. As you were speaking, you wanted some waste management centers to mention some options. You said that some waste management centers should be built around the city where people could get information with respect to waste management. Here's what I think. I think people, mainly the BBMP, as you mentioned Bangalore, BBMP should make an app for waste management. Okay. Cell phone, almost all of us in Bangalore have cell phones, and most of them are smartphones. Okay, and I've jotted down some points. Okay, at the grassroots level, people should be taught how to segregate waste. And children, as you said, nowadays are not coming out to play. They play Angry Birds on iPad. Everything is on iPad. Okay, why not create a game of waste management on iPad? I mean, some waste will be there on one side. The child should segregate or should say whether it is wet or dry. That would really help the child as well as educate their parents.
1 second. Can someone take these ideas down? I'd really like to.
Written it down.
Okay. I'd really like to, take these ideas back, because the thing is, we interact with BBMP very frequently, and this may sound simplistic or everyday, but these are extremely important and very good ideas. So thank you. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, wet and dry, and that app for adults should include wet and dry segregation, FAQs and queries, and it should give something like waste management tip of the day or waste management tip of the week. Then if the person is not able to segregate or say whether it's a wet or dry, as you said, a person, suppose he is in a dilemma, whether he won't be in a position to segregate the waste, then he must be able to click a pic of it, and he should be able to send it via that app, and the people or the people in charge should respond to that. Then the waste collectors of the area should have some waste collector ID. This is optional. You can fit the card with GPS. Nowadays, all the buses are fitted with GPS.
Yes.
This is cheap. Or some GPS or some Indian equivalent.
Right.
Okay. Then, if there are any complaints regarding waste management and waste collectors, people should be able to inform the higher authorities through these apps, and this is actually helpful because the people need not go to such waste management centers. They can do everything at home, and it would educate them. Yeah, and it should educate the people as well. Complaints. Anything that need to be added can be added by DBMP. That's it. That's what and mainly the games for children.
All right. What's your name?
Manu.
Manu. Thank you so much. Those are very good ideas. Any other ideas?
Well, I had a query.
Yes.
In my house, in my house we separate the waste into two categories: dry waste and wet waste. But you said there are 6 categories mentioned by the BBMP. So are those 6 categories need to be done at the resident level, or is it done by the BBMP after collecting the waste?
Yes, so initially in 2012 when they instituted those 6 categories, what they said was everyone needs to do it at the household level. But now with the waste crisis happening all over again, with the landfill closure and them not getting extension, what they have done is they actually took one of our recommendations from our study and said, yes, we will simplify it into 2 categories. So now if you look around you, the waste categories have been simplified, and now it's 2 categories. It's dry waste and wet waste. So that was one of the recommendations that they did listen to.
And also, if the BBMP has a website in which people can post queries, many times it is repetitive, like some problem which I have, maybe my neighbor also has.
Yes.
So in that case, it will be very helpful. Maybe it is just an alternative to the app.
Or like the FAQs that he mentioned. Yeah, sure.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, I go to this orphanage called Abhilashram, and there I kind of interact with the girls there, and they're all from government schools, Kannada medium. Like in English medium schools, we have it in a subject called EVS in our syllabus. But then when I talk to them about global warming or waste segregation and stuff like that, they were completely unaware of any of these things. They were like, I don't even know what that is. I've never heard of that in my life. So every education starts from schooling. So why not just include a subject like EVS? But even we had subjects like EVS, but we never really bothered to, do anything practically. Get any, come up with some alternate source of energy or something. The simple things that we kids can do. So why not? Why can't there be internships which can be recognized ones, like certificate courses or something that you get certificates for? So why don't we have internships like that even in colleges, not just in schools, so that we can practically apply something? Because all of these theoretically sounds great, awesome, but when we want to practically apply it, none of us are up to the mark in doing so. So internships could help, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So at the curriculum level, include it at the curriculum level and have a practical application of it basically. So what I was talking about the PAR schools was that. So these schools basically had EVS in their curriculum, and this thing about global warming or waste or whatever, this was all part of their curriculum where they were required to do, and it was a group activity because it's not something that you do on a student by student basis, but it was a group activity where the school or the class in its entirety, say 8th grade, was doing a project, and they had to show a practical demonstration of what their project would turn out to be like, or it had to have some social manifestation. So you had to you had to show that if you went and you educated the people in the slum about waste. So after a year, what was the output? What was the waste generated? Was it significantly reduced? Did people still not understand? So they actually had to show how what they did found practical application in the society. And so yes, I don't know if all the schools have that in their curriculum, but it would be extremely important to have that. I mean, I remember back in my time, and I don't know if it's still there, but we had something called civics or something. And that was mostly about governance and about the structure of the governance, but it didn't deal with basically personal civic behavior. And that is not something that we teach in schools, and that's unfortunate because I think at some level we kind of need to. So yes, at the curriculum level, and then to have it as a practical output is something that is very necessary. And we do engage with schools, but we, I guess, unfortunately engage with schools who show interest. If you have a school or you're a college who shows interest, that we are interested in finding out more about this or exploring this as a theme, or can you help us as scientists find practical applications of so and so? We do that, but we don't go out and proactively get schools to come and say, here, let us show you what this is about, or we're not in that business. We don't teach schools. It's just that if you're an interested school or a college, we'll participate with you, we'll help you with your projects. But yes, I think that's a very valuable suggestion. There was one question over here. Yes.
Very good afternoon, ma'am. I have another question for the entire government as such. When we ourselves, as in Bangalore or India as a whole, have this overwhelming garbage or the crisis, why are we importing waste from other countries? When we ourselves have that, why do we have to take e-waste or any such wastes from other countries and dump it in our landfills and make the situation worse? Since you said you're constantly interacting with BBMP and the other officials, I just want you to have that thought and put across the word and discuss this matter with them as well. Because I feel we are polluting our own lands, and apart from that, we're taking waste from other countries and we are making the situation worse. And another point that I would like to suggest is that why don't we try to export our bio-waste? And suppose if we do not have such facilities for, as of now, facilities to implement the recycling of certain waste, why don't we try to export the same and get the product end product out of it, like a fuel or something like that, and then bring it back, or have some terms, maybe a word, you know, to reduce this overwhelming waste crisis.
Well, to the first part of your question, why are we doing it? Why are we importing waste? That is a national policy level question which needs to be asked to the central government on why they're doing that. The e-waste, I think, like I said, we have an excellent recycling industry here in Bangalore and also in India. We have a very good recycling industry. There are people whose livelihoods depend on that and who live off of recycling those e-wastes. And I don't know, I'm not the authority to speak on it, so I don't know if it's an economy generator or is it detrimental to our environment. I'm not quite sure where the balance is. So that's one part, and it's also a national level policy which I think we can, you can debate about and talk to the government about. But yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to find out why we're doing it at all, because we have a sufficiently big enough population that we can just do with our waste. The second part of your question, exporting waste, we can't export wet waste, because the usable wet waste, which can be turned into compost or which can be turned into biofuel, the life is very short. It's actually 12 hours. So ideally, waste should be picked up twice in a day, once in the morning, once in the evening, if you're going to make anything good